Over 60, top 4 protein foods to rebuild eye strength naturally. Most people believe vision loss after 60 is just bad luck or a normal part of aging. But let me shock you, 99% of people over 60 have no idea that the real reason their eyesight fades isn't age itself, it's what's on their plate. Yes, your dinner could be quietly stealing your vision or saving it. Think about it. Have you noticed headlights at night blinding you more than they used to? Do words on the page seem fuzzier even with glasses? Some will tell you, well, that's just old age, nothing you can do. But others, backed by science, argue the exact opposite, that your eyes are living tissue, and with the right nutrition, you can actually protect, repair, and even strengthen them. Here's the truth your doctor probably never told you. You don't need exotic supplements or miracle cures. The secret is hiding in 4 ordinary protein-rich foods that research shows can slow macular degeneration, reduce cataract risk, and even bring relief from dry, burning eyes. These aren't rare or expensive. You probably have at least one in your kitchen right now. And yet almost no one knows how powerful they are. As a physician who's spent over 4 decades treating older adults, I've seen patients give up driving, stop reading, even lose their independence, all because no one told them that food could rebuild their eyes. Imagine if something as simple as adding the right protein to your breakfast could help you keep reading, driving, and recognizing the faces you love. So before we dive in, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend or loved one who wants to stay sharp, and subscribe to our channel. That's what keeps us motivated to bring you more of these life-changing, science-backed tips. Stay with me, because the #1 food on this list will absolutely surprise you. And once you learn it, you'll never look at your breakfast the same way again. Why eyes weaken after 60? Before we dive into the foods that can rebuild your eye strength, it's important to understand what's really happening as your eyes age. Most people assume vision loss is simply a part of getting older, but that isn't the full story. Your eyes, just like your muscles or your heart, are made of living tissue. That tissue is constantly breaking down and repairing itself, and when you don't get the right nutrients, the repair slows down. Over time, damage starts to outpace healing, and that's when you notice changes in your vision. One of the most common problems is macular degeneration. The macula is the part of the eye that lets you see detail, recognize faces, and read clearly. When it weakens, your world loses its sharpness. Studies show that nearly 1 in 3 adults over the age of 75 has some form of macular degeneration. If you've noticed it takes longer to read street signs or you need more light in the evening to see comfortably, those may be early signs. Research, including the well-known ARDS-2 study, has proven that nutrition plays a powerful role in slowing this process. Cataracts are another major issue. Imagine looking through a foggy window. That's what a cataract does to your lens. Your lens is mostly water and protein, and when those proteins clump together, they scatter light instead of letting it pass smoothly. The result is hazy vision and dulled colors. More than half of Americans will develop cataracts by the age of 75, but diets rich in antioxidants and protein have been shown to slow their progression. Even something as simple as maintaining higher levels of vitamin C in your diet has been linked to a lower risk. And then there's dry eye syndrome, one of the most overlooked but frustrating problems for older adults. Your tear film, which keeps your eyes comfortable, needs a balance of water, oils, and proteins. When that balance breaks down, your tears evaporate too quickly, leaving your eyes irritated and blurry. Over 16 million Americans struggle with dry eyes, and the rates climb sharply after 60. It might not sound as serious as cataracts or macular degeneration, but it can make reading, watching TV, or simply enjoying the day far more difficult. The hopeful part is that none of these changes are set in stone. They are influenced by what you eat, and protein plays a central role. Proteins provide the amino acids your body uses to repair the retina, strengthen the lens, and stabilize your tear glands. Without enough, the repair system slows, but when you get them from the right foods, your eyes can remain sharper and stronger well into your later years. I think of Margaret, a 72-year-old patient of mine who stopped driving at night because headlights were unbearable. Her diet was heavy on calories but light on protein. We made simple changes, adding eggs, salmon, lentils, and yogurt into her meals. Within a few months, her night vision improved, and by 6 months she felt confident enough to drive after dark again. She hadn't regained her eyesight through a miracle drug, but through nourishing her body with what it had been missing. The lesson is clear. Vision loss is not just aging. It's also nutrition. And when you give your eyes the protein they need, you give them the chance to repair, protect, and keep serving you for decades to come. Protein and the eyes, the missing link. Why protein? Isn't eye health supposed to be all about vitamins like A, C, and E? Haven't we all been told to eat carrots for better vision? While vitamins and antioxidants are important, here's the truth most people never hear. Without protein, those nutrients can't do their job. Think of your eyes as a house. Vitamins and minerals are the tools, the paint, and the polish. Protein is the bricks and the wood. Without the structure, there's nothing to repair or protect. Inside your eyes, certain amino acids play critical roles. Taurine, glycine, and lysine are especially concentrated in the retina and lens. Taurine is the most abundant amino acid in the retina, working like a shield to protect delicate cells from oxidative stress. Glycine supports collagen production, which helps maintain the strength and clarity of the cornea. Lysine aids tissue repair and immune defense, both essential for eyes constantly exposed to light, oxygen, and environmental stress. Collagen itself is a protein, and it forms the framework of the cornea and lens. When protein intake is too low, collagen weakens, raising the risk of lens clouding and corneal problems. Science continues to back this up. A study in the Journal of Nutrition, Health and Aging showed that seniors with higher protein intake had lower rates of vision loss compared to those with low-protein diets. The large-scale ARDS-2 trial confirmed that nutrients found in protein-rich foods, like zinc and omega-3 fatty acids, significantly reduced the risk of advanced macular degeneration. Omega-3s keep retinal cell membranes flexible, while zinc carries vitamin A to the retina to form protective pigments. Without protein, those nutrients never reach where they're needed most. Low-protein diets also affect the muscles that support your eyes. Sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle, doesn't just weaken your arms and legs, it makes the small muscles that help your eyes focus less effective. That's why older adults sometimes notice it takes longer to adjust from bright sunlight to a dim room. It's not just age, it's also a lack of protein fueling those muscles. Surveys show nearly 40% of Americans over 70 don't meet their daily protein needs, and the consequences show up not only in weaker bodies, but in weaker eyes. I remember one of my patients, James, a 74-year-old retired teacher. He told me his eyes were always tired and that night driving had become nearly impossible. When I looked at his diet, I saw he was barely eating 45 grams of protein a day. We added simple changes: yogurt in the morning, a boiled egg as a snack, lentil soup at lunch, and fish twice a week. Within a few months, James could read longer without eye strain, and headlights at night didn't blind him the way they used to. His ophthalmologist later noted his macular degeneration hadn't advanced that year. That wasn't luck, it was nutrition. So yes, carrots are good, but protein is essential. It's what builds collagen, protects the retina, fuels the muscles that move your eyes, and delivers the vitamins you already know you need. My advice is simple: make protein part of every meal, not just dinner. Pair it with vegetables and healthy fats for maximum benefit, because what you eat today can decide whether you'll enjoy sharp, independent vision tomorrow. Now let me ask you this. The next time you sit down to eat, is there enough protein on your plate to give your eyes what they need to stay strong? Or are you leaving your vision to chance? Number 4, eggs, the vision defender. Eggs may seem simple, but for your eyes they are nothing short of remarkable. The yolk is especially rich in lutein and zeaxanthin, two antioxidants that gather in the macula and act like natural sunglasses, filtering harmful blue light from screens and sunlight. Without these compounds, your retina is left more vulnerable to damage that builds up with age. Eggs also supply vitamin A, which protects against night blindness, and zinc, which carries vitamin A from your liver to your retina, where it forms protective pigments. This combination makes eggs one of the most effective foods for keeping vision sharp. The science is convincing. A study from Tufts University showed that eating just one egg a day significantly boosted blood levels of lutein and zeaxanthin in older adults without raising cholesterol. Another study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition linked regular egg consumption to a lower risk of advanced macular degeneration. In my practice, I have seen these benefits firsthand. Helen, age 69, was worried about losing her sight because her mother had suffered from macular degeneration. She began eating eggs regularly, boiled for breakfast, or in a vegetable omelet, and over the next year her eye exams showed stability with no decline. Another patient, Robert, 75, had nearly given up driving at night because of the glare from headlights. After adding eggs to his diet a few times a week, combined with leafy greens, he noticed less glare and greater confidence behind the wheel. Many older adults still avoid eggs because of outdated fears about cholesterol. But research now shows that moderate egg consumption is safe for most people and offers significant protective benefits for the eyes. The key is not to skip the yolk, because that's where most of the nutrients are found. Whether scrambled, poached, or hard-boiled, eggs are affordable, easy to prepare, and versatile enough to fit into any meal of the day. So ask yourself this: Are eggs a regular part of your routine, or are you missing out on one of the simplest ways to defend your vision? For many seniors, adding just a few eggs each week can make a noticeable difference in comfort, clarity, and long-term eye health. Number 3, fatty fish, the retinal repairer. When it comes to nourishing the eyes, few foods are as powerful as fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel. These fish provide not only high-quality protein, but also an abundant supply of omega-3 fatty acids, particularly DHA, which is a structural fat found in the retina. DHA keeps the membranes of retinal cells flexible and efficient, allowing them to transmit signals clearly. Without enough omega-3s, these cells become sluggish, and the risk of degeneration rises. Fatty fish also help prevent dry eye syndrome by improving the oil layer of the tear film, reducing evaporation and irritation. The research here is impressive. The Women's Health Study, which followed over 39,000 women, found that those who ate fish rich in omega-3s at least twice a week had a 42% lower risk of developing advanced age-related macular degeneration compared to women who rarely ate fish. Another study published in Investigative Ophthalmology and Visual Science showed that people with higher blood levels of omega-3 fatty acids were significantly less likely to have signs of dry eye disease. These are not small findings. They show that something as simple as eating fish a couple of times a week can translate into decades of clearer, more comfortable vision. I've seen these results firsthand in my practice. Richard, a 75-year-old patient of mine, struggled for years with burning, gritty eyes. He carried eye drops everywhere and could barely sit through a movie without discomfort. We adjusted his diet to include salmon twice a week and sardines as a quick snack. Within 3 months, he noticed that he was reaching for his drops less often, and by 6 months he reported that his eyes no longer felt dry when he woke up in the morning. His ophthalmologist later confirmed his tear film was healthier and more stable. Richard's quality of life improved, not because of a prescription, but because he started using food as medicine. Another patient, Linda, age 70, had been diagnosed with early-stage macular degeneration. She had always avoided fish because she thought cooking it was too much work. I suggested easy options like canned sardines or smoked salmon, which required no preparation beyond opening a package. 6 months later, her follow-up exam showed no progression of the disease, and she told me she actually enjoyed the convenience of her new routine. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. So let me ask you, how often do you eat fish in a typical week? Many older adults admit they rarely eat it, often because of cost, taste preferences, or not knowing how to prepare it. But even modest changes, like 1 serving of salmon on Sunday and a can of sardines midweek, can make a measurable difference. For those who truly cannot tolerate fish, high-quality omega-3 supplements are a reasonable alternative, though I always encourage food first when possible. My advice is clear. Aim for at least 2 servings of fatty fish per week. If fresh fish isn't available, frozen or canned options work just as well. Pair it with leafy greens or whole grains for a balanced meal. Think of these meals not just as dinner, but as an investment in your eyes. Because every bite of salmon or sardine isn't only feeding your body, it's repairing your vision from the inside out. Number 2, legumes, the plant protein protector. Legumes such as lentils, chickpeas, and beans are often overlooked when it comes to eye health, but they play a powerful role in protecting your vision. They provide plant-based protein along with zinc, an essential mineral that helps carry vitamin from your liver to your retina, where it forms protective pigments. Without enough zinc, even if you eat foods rich in vitamin A, your eyes can't use it effectively. This connection is critical because vitamin A deficiency is linked to poor night vision and a higher risk of macular degeneration. Research supports this relationship. A Johns Hopkins study found that seniors with higher zinc intake had a significantly lower risk of developing advanced macular degeneration compared to those with lower zinc levels. Another large study published in the Archives of Ophthalmology confirmed that zinc, when combined with antioxidants, could slow down the progression of age-related vision loss. These results show that legumes, which are inexpensive and widely available, can be a simple but effective way to give your eyes the zinc and protein they need. I've seen the benefits firsthand. Maria, a 68-year-old patient who followed a vegetarian diet, worried that she wasn't getting enough nutrients for her eyes. She had a family history of macular degeneration and noticed more difficulty seeing in dim light. We worked on incorporating lentils, black beans, and chickpeas into her meals, soups, hummus, and hearty bean salads. 6 months later, her eye exam showed stability, and she reported more consistent energy during the day as well. She told me she felt reassured knowing her plant-based choices were supporting her vision. Another patient, George, 72, had borderline blood sugar levels and early signs of macular changes. He didn't enjoy fish or red meat, and his diet was heavy on bread and pasta. I suggested substituting a couple of meals each week with lentil stew or black bean chili. Not only did his vision remain stable over the following year, but his blood sugar improved as well. That's another benefit of legumes. They provide fiber that balances blood sugar, and stable blood sugar protects the tiny vessels in your retina. Now let me ask you, when was the last time you added beans or lentils to your plate? Many older adults skip them because they think of legumes as bland or heavy, but the truth is they are incredibly versatile. You can toss chickpeas on a salad, puree them into hummus for a snack, or simmer lentils into a flavorful soup. These aren't exotic superfoods. They're affordable, accessible staples that can help protect your eyes and your overall health. My advice is to make legumes a regular part of your weekly meals. Aim for at least 2 or 3 servings a week. Pair them with vegetables, herbs, and spices to bring out flavor and variety. Think of them not just as a source of protein, but as protectors of your retina, delivering zinc and steady energy to keep your eyes functioning at their best. Because every bowl of lentil soup or plate of black bean salad isn't just filling your stomach, it's quietly defending your vision for years to come. Number 1, Greek yogurt, the collagen builder. Greek yogurt may look like a simple snack, but for your eyes it acts like a repair kit. It's loaded with high-quality protein, calcium, and vitamin B12, all of which play an important role in keeping your eyes strong. The protein in Greek yogurt directly supports collagen production, and collagen is the scaffolding that holds your cornea and lens in place. When collagen weakens, the lens becomes more prone to clouding, and the cornea loses its shape, both of which affect vision. By providing steady protein, Greek yogurt helps maintain this structure so your eyes stay clear and resilient. Science backs this up. A study in the British Journal of Nutrition found that seniors who consumed more dairy protein had stronger connective tissues compared to those who consumed little or none. This doesn't just apply to bones and joints. It extends to the eyes, where collagen is a key component. Another large review in Nutrients confirmed that adequate protein, along with calcium and vitamin D from dairy, supports not only musculoskeletal health, but also the tissues that protect vision. These findings explain why something as simple as a daily serving of Greek yogurt can make a real difference over time. I've seen it happen with my patients. Tom, 74, had early cataracts that made reading and driving at night increasingly difficult. Surgery wasn't yet necessary, so he wanted to do everything possible to slow the progression. We added 1 cup of plain Greek yogurt with berries to his daily routine. It gave him extra protein to support collagen and antioxidants from the fruit to fight oxidative stress. 2 years later, his ophthalmologist noted that his cataracts had not worsened, and Tom told me he felt relieved to have taken control in such a simple way. Another patient, Evelyn, 70, was experiencing frequent eye fatigue and blurred vision after long periods of reading. She wasn't a big meat eater, so her protein intake was often low. When she started eating Greek yogurt as an afternoon snack, she noticed more sustained energy in her eyes, and her follow-up visit showed stable lens health. So let me ask you this. When you reach for a snack, are you choosing something that fuels your eyes, or just something that fills you up? Many older adults grab crackers, cookies, or sugary treats, but those don't give the body the raw materials it needs to protect vision. A simple bowl of unsweetened Greek yogurt, topped with blueberries or strawberries, not only satisfies hunger, but also provides the protein, calcium, and antioxidants that keep your eyes working at their best. My advice is to choose plain Greek yogurt without added sugar, since excess sugar can accelerate aging of the eyes. If you want flavor, add fresh fruit, a sprinkle of nuts, or even a dash of cinnamon. Aim for at least a few servings a week. Think of it as a small habit with big returns. Every spoonful is feeding the collagen that keeps your lenses clear and your corneas strong. Over time, these small choices add up, giving you the best chance of keeping your eyesight sharp and your independence intact. So let's bring it all together. If you're over 60 and worried about your vision, remember this. Your eyes are not doomed to fade with age. They're living tissue and they respond to the choices you make every single day. We've talked about 4 protein-packed foods, eggs, fatty fish, legumes, and Greek yogurt that can protect your macula, keep your lenses clear, prevent dry eyes, and give your vision the fuel it needs to stay sharp. It's not about chasing miracle pills or gimmicks. It's about simple, everyday foods that science proves can defend your eyesight. And the best part? You don't have to wait years to feel the difference. For many of my patients, the improvements, less glare at night, more comfort while reading, clearer colors, started within just a few months of consistent changes. Now ask yourself this. If something as small as adding the right protein to your meals could mean the difference between independence and dependence, between enjoying life and struggling with blurry vision, why wait another day to start? I want to thank you for watching and for caring about your health. If you found value in this video, please give it a like, share it with someone you love, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next science-based health tip. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating these videos for you. Take care of your eyes, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.